where does the situation with Bullard and the cheerleaders and all of that stuff, where does that sit right now? Because it's changing by the hour as far as I can tell.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.
Anytime, sir.
It's been a pleasure and honor. Last report that I met with the mothers last night and community leaders and members was stating that there's a lot of fights going on at Bullard. I believe it was 6 in one day, 3 another day. Seems to be a lot of tension that has occurred at the Bullard campus. For those of you who know me, my name is Dr. Harris, Reverend Dr. Floyd Harris Jr. I'm an international civil rights leader here in Fresno, as well as across the country, assistant pastor at New Life and Light Church of God. Also have my own radio show called Dr. Harris Black Lives Matter Show. We air every night on Blog Talk Radio from 8 to 10. Fresno is a melting pot right now.
Is it just because of the heat, or is it?
It's a melting pot right now because of it is the heat too. But I think that
which does make it worse. I mean, when, for example, the summer when Watts and Bakersfield were on fire, it was a very hot summer, and the fires continue the heat. People get irritable when they're a little sweaty.
Right. But I guess what has occurred here in Fresno, I believe the race issue here in Fresno it's always been a big concern. It's always, as Mayor Alan Autry ran for mayor, he said it was the tales of two cities, the haves and the has not. We understand that north of Shaw outvotes the entire city, so it pretty much controls the wealth of the decision making and what have you. Even though we have more populated folks south of Shaw, it's just a place of poverty, which we are the number 2 in the nation with the highest concentration of poverty. So there's a lot of dynamics that's playing here, and so as we know that once upon a time that busing African Americans, black kids and students into North Fresno, we knew that West Fresno was without a middle school for so many years. We just built a middle school in the past, I believe, 5-6 years. And so kind of giving a little context of where we are as black people here in Fresno. And we just received a shopping center over the past. I mean, so it's like we're the last to get anything.
Right. Well, I remember they put that Vallarta market in next to the cop shop over.
Right.
It was like, and it really was. I went over there and was checking it out, and there are a couple of little corner stores that are sweet places. I love to go to those places because everybody's so friendly, and it's like the day, right?
Right.
But you can't do your regular shopping there. You can run and grab a quart of milk. You can run and grab a bread.
Right.
You can grab a hot dog, or not a hot dog, but anyway, a popsicle or something like that. But it's not to do your shopping.
Right.
And Fresno has several, both in southwest and southeast Fresno. There are several areas that are so underserved by just to buy food.
Right.
It's unbelievable how with the number of businesses that are in this city, the disparity and what has cracked me up, and I'll just do a little aside, and then we'll come back to the Bullard stuff, but I've been back 20 years. I've been in this valley since 1967, so I've been in and out of this valley for a long time. So I'm real familiar with how Fresno has sprawled out into the north end, which they said they didn't want to do, but they did it anyway. But what cracks me up is that as you drive north on Blackstone, and you see places that are getting a little run down, there had a lot of turnover or whatever, but you go, for 40 years, such and so was there. Drive 5 miles farther north, and that's where the story is now. I mean, Herb Bauer is a great example of that, right? They started off downtown, then they moved up to where Abbey and Blackstone split, and now they're up, up by Sierra, wherever it is, Barstow, whatever it is. Next thing, they're going to be up at Fryan, and it's just they keep moving toward the white people as much as they can because that is, Fresno is a textbook case of white flight, and I encourage everyone. Most of us spend so much time in our own worlds, our jobs, our schools, our neighborhoods. That's what we see. And I think sometimes it's hard to understand. When we say today, and you were talking about busing, and this is a really important issue. I'll talk to you about that for quite a bit. When we say, that our schools were segregated in 1954. That's the Brown v. Board of Education.
Right.
Today, our schools are more segregated than
Right.
they were in 54, and
Right.
nobody's talking about it.
Exactly.
In fact, the only person I've heard talk about it at all was Kamala Harris at one of the debates where she talked about how busing had been beneficial to her.
Right.
And I'm about that same age. She's a little younger than I am, but I was around in California when the busing was being done,
Right.
and it was insane, both in good ways and in bad ways, and
Right.
every community struggled with it. Hanford initially did a marvelous job with it. They just said, we're going to just throw everybody together. Everybody in junior high for the entire city was in one school.
Right.
So it was 6 years in your neighborhood school, then 2 years at junior high, then the high school had 2 campuses, freshman and sophomore on one campus, juniors and seniors on the other. 6 years, everybody in town, no problems, no
Right.
fights, no gangs. Town continued to grow. They opened a second junior high, a third high school. Now they got gangs, they got shoes hanging from wires running across the intersection. I mean, all of the stuff,
Right.
because people are separate.
Right.
When people are rubbing elbows, this is the simplest thing in the world, right?
Right.
It's easy to, this is why parts of the Midwest are so racist when they don't have any black people or
Right.
brown people. They got Indians, but they don't look at the Indians. I mean, I lived in Glenham, South Dakota, 8 miles away from where one of the 3 places that claim to be Sitting Bull's burial spot, 8 miles from the largest Pine Ridge Reservation. Pine Ridge is the largest reservation in the world, and a little blonde German kid sitting next to me said to his teacher,
Uh-huh.
I've never seen an Indian. And yet we grew up playing with full-blood Oglala Sioux. Bobby Dale was one of our best friends, went to his birthday party, but he didn't have feathers, so he wasn't an Indian, right? So when you don't see diversity,
Right.
you can't embrace diversity.
Right.
When you are thrust into it by living in an urban area, this is why urban areas tend to be more inclusive, even with the problems that we have.
Right.
When you rub elbows with people, you realize people are people.
Right.
And that there are good people and bad people in every group, and
Right.
that there's such benefit from expanding your horizons. But most of us don't see that.
Right.
So I would encourage everyone listening that has access to a computer to go and do a quick search. I believe it's called the racial dot map. It might be called the one dot map, but it's one or the other. But if you do a search for racial dot map, you'll find
Right.
it. And it's a map of the United States from the last census, and they'll be updating it when the new census comes in. But for every person in the census, they
Right.
put a dot on the map within that census tract
Right.
to represent the racial or ethnic makeup of that person. So you can graphically see
Mhm.
the segregation. And if you go and you pull that up and you look at Fresno, you are going to see, there are zip codes in Fresno that are 75% black. And there are children that live on the north end that have never seen a black person, right?
Wow.
In a town that has such a large, we're above I think we're above the national average. National average is about 7%, and I think we're about 8.5%. So, but if you look at that map, you'll see that in southwest Fresno, and there are some neighborhoods that are really, really dark. Lots and lots of black people. Then you go over to southwest Fresno, and it's lots and lots of brown people. But then as you go north,
Mhm.
as you get closer and closer, as you get, like you said, you hit Shaw, then you continue up, it gets whiter and whiter. And by the time you get out to where Willow International or Clovis Community College is,
Right.
with the exception of about 6 Asian people, it's completely white. And so even in a town as diverse as Fresno, and it is a city, it's the 5th largest city in the state. If you took Fresno and put it in any other state, we'd be the largest city.
Right, right.
We live in a metro
Right.
area, but we want to pretend we live in Fowler, which is another part of the problem. I can remember talking about urban issues. I was speaking at a meeting, and I said, well, this would apply to urban areas and their suburbs. So basically this would be for Fresno. And somebody in Fresno raised their hand and said, we have suburbs? I said, what do you think Clovis is? And somebody from Clovis said, no, we're not a suburb. I said, you're a small town attached to a city. You're a suburb. Get over it, right? And they're like, but. So we try to believe we live in this, that we all live in this little tiny town. We live in a major urban area. And because we don't admit it, we end up with all the urban problems and none of the urban benefits. Like we don't know our neighbors.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I went off on a tirade there. I apologize. I get so riled up, and
my grandmother, who has Alzheimer's now, raised me. She worked in Fig Garden Loop right there. back in the early 70s, which was predominantly white. Maybe one or
Better
two.
now, but
Right.
it's still very white.
And she cleaned house for a lady, older white lady, and
it's a living. It's a good job.
And my grandma did a good job. I mean, she took me with me. You know, she taught me some stuff. You know, and but what was interesting was that I didn't really, you know, at the age of 6, 7, you don't even know about racism. You know, you just going with grandma. So, but one day we were downtown when Ted's was there and Got Chocks and all that, and we ran into the lady that she cleaned her house, and I said, "Grandma," I said, "That's who you work for." I won't say her name, and she says, "Yeah, that is her." So we walked over there, and she was with 3 other white women.
And she ignored you.
How did you know that?
This ain't my first rodeo, my friend. This ain't my first rodeo.
And my grandma called her by name, and she kind of glanced but kept her head straight. And I never could understand. My grandma understood, but I didn't understand how a black woman could clean a white lady's home, see her in public, and just totally diss her, just completely like don't speak, don't do anything. And so I'll never forget the look my grandma had till this day. And she was like hurt, you know.
You know, remember when Obama was running the first time, right?
Right.
And Jeremiah Wright was running. And at the time, Reverend Wright was about 65, about the age we are now, close to it. And he's up there preaching and expressing frustration and anger of the 450 years plus of I can't say the word on the air, that we call our racial relations in this country.
Right.
And everyone was going, "Oh, he's an angry black man." I've been ever since. I've said, "Look, if you're 65 years old, you live in the United States, and you're a black man, you have every right to be pissed off,
Right.
because so." Let's get back to the stuff that's going on with Bullard. We could have this discussion for the next 10 hours, and I would still be livid, and I'd still be screaming and hollering, and I'd probably end up swearing and be fined, and I'd go bankrupt having to pay the FCC. But it might be worth it.
Right.
But so, as I said in the intro, this thing that's going on with Bullard was sparked by. And there's a bunch of stuff. Wasn't it the Bullard High School cheerleaders that also had the problem with the trustee that got censured? So I was going to pull that information in too when I wrote the intro tonight, but I was running a little late on time. So Bullard's got a bunch of issues, and a lot of it seems to be racial, and we can get into that. I read a Fresno PD article in which the girl's family, the mother of the girl, was really, it was a long. And in many places, there's no way you could say it was anything but heartfelt apology for what their daughter had done. And she explained in that the friend's house that they were at was an African American girl, and it wasn't necessarily intended as blackface. They were using a bunch of different colors, but that was what was on the video, and those were the words. And it's a great lesson to learn as to where the lines are, right? And you know, it's just and use of the N-word. This is one of the most interesting things, because if you listen to rap music, it's there. You listen to people talking. You listen to 2 African Americans speaking to each other, depending on their age, they may or may not own that term and use it, and it isn't a sign of disrespect. However, for me to use that term without someone's permission is completely disrespectful. When I was in Los Angeles in 1975, I was working in a theater down there, and my best friend and the guy that I worked the most closely with was this black dude. And it's funny because our boss, we'd come in, we always showed up a little bit late. We were both coming in late, and the boss would say, "You guys walk alike, you talk alike, you look alike." We'd both go, "Thank you," because he's as dark as you are, and I'm as white as I am. Right. But so frustrated. But these issues, here, and I really want us to really get real about this, because I teach classes on theory about race, and I try to teach the history of the United States basically as the history of race. That's how I teach it, right? I natives, blacks, immigrants. That's the thread that I tell when I teach U.S. history. And the racial issue, for some reason, my entire adult life has been something very crucial to me. And I think it was because when we came out of North Dakota, South Dakota, we came to California, the first place we were was in Hanford. And I didn't know I wasn't supposed to like the people that I didn't look like. I thought it was cool that there were all these weird looking people that I had never seen before. And I don't mean that no disrespect. I'm talking about an 11-year-old kid who comes to California and for the first time sees Asian people. I'd never seen an Asian person in person before. I had never seen a black person. I saw one black person the only black people I knew were Sidney Poitier, Bill Cosby, and Diane Carroll. And I didn't know they were actually real. They were just in movies and TV. Leslie Uggams, I thought she was hot. But I was only 11. But to me, coming and seeing this diversity, it changed me. And I have been in this place for over 50 years now. It has always been kind of at the core of everything I do, even though I may not have always been active in it because I was doing different jobs and stuff, but race and these issues has always been very important to me. And there's a story, and I would like to get your opinion of this incident, because this is how I read it, and I would love to hear your take on it. Many years ago, I was about 27, I was in a restaurant in North Fresno with 7 friends of mine, all from outside of the United States. They'd all been here for quite a while. They were all foreigners, but they all had been here a long time. And now, you gotta remember, we were all single. This was 40 years ago. We were not as politically correct as we should have been. We were just a bunch of horny young men. And for some reason, that particular restaurant it wasn't a Hooters or any place like that. It was just a regular place to eat, and the uniforms weren't provocative or anything like that, but there wasn't a non-beautiful waitress in the place. And they were very diverse. And it was, and so we've got this big table, there's 8 guys sitting at the table, and the waitresses come up, and we're talking and flirting and, looking at the names and all this stuff. And being pretty misogynistic, actually. But this ebony goddess came up and filled the coffee cups. And when she walked away, I turned to my friends and I said, "Now that is a beautiful woman." And they all agreed. And then I said, "But not one of you would ever date her." And they're, "Oh no, Michael, that's not true. We're not." I said, "I've known you guys for years." By that point, I had known him probably 5 or 6 years. I said, "I've seen you date Hispanic chicks. I've seen you date blondes. I've seen you date Middle Eastern chicks. I've seen you date all of this." I said, "How many of you read her name tag?" Not one. They'd gotten their name tags off of the blonde girls and the Hispanic girls and the Asian girls that had come by earlier. But not one of them. Well, one of them I did. But but the others, not one of them. And finally one of them said, "You're right. I never realized I had that." Right? And as awful as what has spewed from the White House and their heavy supporters has been, at least it's open, and it can be addressed. The racism that really scares me is I can't be racist because my best friend is black, right? Or whatever it happens to be. I'm curious, your thoughts about that incident and the difference between the overt, blatant racism of some chickie going on with blackface.
Well, I think the country, it's hard for me to Always have to have
I
some.
mean, I'm not asking you as a monolithic
No.
black person. I'm just
No. I understand.
your experience.
Is that this country has, even from the Constitution, has created this atmosphere. Even when it put language that black people was 3/5 of a human being. See, it was not just. It's been in black and white, okay, and it's been a taught behavior that black, there's no value in black, there's no trust in black, there's no, we're gonna, anything that's black, we're gonna dehumanize it. But yet, when we look at black, we will see that black invented just about everything in this country that you were at the restaurant enjoying.
When Go ahead. I'm sorry. I had a thought. I was thinking, and then I lost what I was going to.
But I think from our perspective right now in 2019, we have to learn from history. I think the biggest problem I have right now, as we talked about the school system, is that the school system do not have curriculum that teach it real and raw like it should be taught, but to really sugarcoat it to make it not feel so whatever. I think it's doing an injustice to our country. So no one really has the real understanding of the real history and where this terminology word. Will we get fined if I say the word N?
Yes.
We will.
No, you won't get fined, but I'd rather you.
Okay, all right. The N word.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just.
No, I want to be respectful.
For example, and I was quoting something that had the N word in it, and I used the word because I was quoting. I was at college level, university level class. And I was taken all the way up to the college president. They wanted me fired. They wanted me out of there. And they kept saying, but he wasn't, he was just reading a sign. Right? And it's like, but you have to, I mean, there are times when it has to be used because this was used in the past, but you have to frame it. It's I wasn't calling anyone that. I was just reading the sign. And so it gets very, the entire race topic is often very difficult to talk about. It's great to get a bunch of academics together. We've got all the buzzwords and we can just talk about it.
Right.
But that doesn't matter because it isn't going to actually change anything. We might help our students change, but it's really the community engagement that's going to make the change. And so that's why I'm just curious about your thoughts on that. So what are we planning to do? What is the plan as far as Bullard? What's going on? I know you've met with some of the parents. And
I met with some of the parents last night, and we had a great conversation. I think that a lot of the parents are hurt. A lot of the parents are dumbfounded, for lack of better words. Children were still do not understand how this young lady is still on the team after using this terminology, and not just one time, but multiple times. Multiple times, videos and different things that are on campuses. Then the conversations comes, well, this happened at home, not on the Bullard school campus, but yet I seen her use
video is
on the campus, and then it's like, well, so now the black cheerleader is like, well, we don't want to be associated with you, okay, because you have a behavior that has been offensive to us, a pattern, and we just don't want to be associated. And so my understanding is that the cheer coach and the cheerleaders voted and said, we don't want you on the team. From that standpoint, I was told that the Terry Slack, the trustee for that area, got wind of it and went down to the school. And at that point, it was a closed practice. Someone, administrator, let him in, and he went in and telling them, you need to cut all this out. You need to stop talking about the blackface, and so. These young ladies don't even know who this man is, even though you give your title. They're in high school. They don't know who they may know who the superintendent is, but a school board man is like, okay, so who are you? And it's like, so he's talking in a tone that, from girls' standpoint, could be scary, offensive, and now you're making statements that, well, I can stop you from going to camp, and I can stop you from doing this. You better stop. And it's like, parents pay their money, over $700-800 to send these kids to buy their gear. And it's like, first of all, how can you come in and decide what's going to happen to a cheerleading team when you are a school board member and you make policy? You don't have the right or the audacity to come on a campus and address anyone. That's why we hired a principal with our tax dollars. I, a citizen here, I pay taxes. We vote in school board members to hire a superintendent. The superintendent hire his staff to be principals. So board members do not have the authority to go into a campus addressing anyone. Okay, so that's the first problem.
Now, the board did censure him,
right,
but didn't remove him,
right,
for doing that. And I had actually forgotten that is the same. That's the same incident that's been going on since July, which is this wrapped up with this cheerleader thing.
Well, I mean, there was a prior incident in January where he went to the campus walking, and there was I believe Latino, I'm not sure, and he grabbed his arm and his backpack and was trying to pull him or something, and so the Latino kind of like looked at him like, and young people today, you're just not going to walk up to them and just push them around like they're a piece of paper or a piece of trash and they don't stand up to you. And again, he did not have the right to do that. And so I look at that, grabbing him, as an assault. Because if my child would have did that, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Let me reel it in real quick. If I was a black man, school board member of Bullard, went to a cheerleading practice and used the same tone, same language, and those children would have went home crying, upset, mad, intimidated. And let's not forget about the restraining order that's against this trustee by a cheerleader. I believe before I got home, I would have had the helicopter, sheriff, highway patrol, SWAT team, everybody follow me to arrest me, because the Bullard community, which is predominantly white, would have said, how dare this black man come in here and intimidate our babies and talk like that? Mm-hmm. See, so there's a double standard. When you white, there's one set of rules. When you're black, there's another set of rules.
But and this is why language matters so much, because those double standards are so deeply ingrained that we, in our daily conversations, in our daily interactions, we often forget that when we are speaking to one another, there are certain assumed defaults. Mm-hmm. The default is always white. You never identify somebody as being white, right? You identify them if they're black, if they're Hispanic, if they're Asian, if they're Middle Eastern, but if they're just a person, they're white.
Right.
And just even in that little bit of inconsequential discussion, it impacts the perception of non-white people. Right? If a person is white and everyone else has to be labeled, then there is a distinction, and that distinction then leads to there must be a difference. Right. And therein, I think, I know this is really, it sounds like really base level stuff, but that we've had such a history, and there is so much couched, and so many, just like you said, the Constitution, 25 provisions of the Constitution were put in there to protect slavery. Much of the private property language in the Constitution was specifically put there to protect slavery. Exactly. And so you cannot separate yourself. You can't. If you try to separate American history from race, it's a fairy tale. Right. There is no history, because without what we have done, whether it's to Native Americans, whether it's to African Americans, whether it's to in the more recent years Latinos. I mean, I look at my students, and the majority of the students are brown. I live in California. I ask my students, what happened here in 1775? And they go, Bunker Hill. I said, no, what happened here? And they can't even tell me that it was Spain for 250 or 300 years before that, or let alone that it was Mexico for 30 years. And I'll say, well, so when you went to fourth grade, when you were in fourth grade and you did California history, what did you talk about? Missions, Spain, because Mexico torn down. strip the church of the property, and gold rush. White
Right.
people coming to California. They don't talk about Mexico for those 30 years. They don't talk about that it's even Spain. It's just somehow the Padres are here. And so there's this weird concept. Where, what was the first thing we did? We took the property of the Mexicans because we threw out Article 9 of the Treaty. Article 9 of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which said property rights had to be respected. And then we deported Mexicans from California back to their country. I mean, if you just say, okay, the history is Spanish missions and the gold rush, that's a pretty interesting history. But it doesn't say anything. But if you throw those other pieces in the middle, people go, well, wait a minute. Why did we deport all the people that already lived here? Because we had to make room for white people, right? Oh, California came in as a free state. But then you could own the labor of Indians that lived on your land, or people went around making a living as bounty hunters, killing Indians, so and the state paid for it. The state paid per head.
Right.
So, race is at the core of what it means to be an American, but we ignore it, and so then we don't understand why people just can't get along. Why can't we just we're all in this equal, we're all on a level playing field.
Right.
We're not.
And I think that's the problem now with the Bullard community. This recall is supposed to be happening that the Bullard community is putting on. I can't recall him because I'm in Edison district, but I can support those African American and talk to them about it's important to why I should recall him. And
what is the black population of Bullard? Do you know how many black students there are there?
That's what we're trying to find out. And parents told me last night that they've been asking the principal to what is that population so they could, check with them and what have you to have a conversation. But he has not given them that information. They asked for the information like a month ago, and he still has not given it to them. Prior to that, going into the Bullard situation, was that we had one of the mothers who is an advocate was speaking at the board meeting, and unfortunately, when she came home, her house was burglarized. All her doors were open, windows were open, and it's like we know what. It was because she was speaking out. Had another parent receive some death threats. And, she went to buy her some protection to protect her and her child. Black children have been pulled out of Bullard. So I'm saying to myself, how is it that we are the ones that are insulted, but yet we're the one pulling our children out of the school, but this young girl who made the statement in the black face is still on the team. And that's what the community is outraged about, is saying we want her off the team.
So, I thought that the other cheerleaders and the coach had voted her off the team.
Exactly. But again, the school administration, the school board member,
who doesn't have any authority whatsoever.
No authority, went in and told them to stop talking about it. And somehow I'm told that they have the same attorney, the trustee, and I don't know. But the point is that the community wants this young lady off the team. And the community, we're going to do a direct action at the first Bullard football game because we want our babies to know that you do not have to put up with this type of
stuff.
That's right. Thank you.
We're going to take a real quick break, and we will come back, and I want to talk about that football game when we come back. Dr. Floyd. You're listening to The Struggle on 88.1 KFCF.
All right.
Yeah, let's talk about the football game.
Yeah, okay.
Bathroom. He had to run to the bathroom.
Yeah, okay. We'll be okay.
Okay, you've told that story 17 times on the air, and we had 3 callers complaining that they didn't want to hear it again.
Well, I haven't told it 17 times. That's a fact.
Have.
You can go back to the tapes and listen. It's not been 17 times.
You've told it a lot.
I've mentioned it a couple of times. But it was apropos. Were they black or white? Were they black or white? And we are back with the struggle on 88.1 KFCF. Dr. Floyd Harris has just stepped out of the room. He'll be right back in a minute. And we were talking about a situation at Bullard High right now where back in July, one of the cheerleaders was posted some blackface videos. One of her at a private home, the other one at least one of the others was done on Bullard High campus. And there are ongoing attempts to try to deal with the situation. And Dr. Harris is back, so there is going to be direct action at the next Bullard football game, is my understanding. Is that correct? So when is the game, and where is it held, and what are people going to do?
Well, I think what we're going to do is going to be kind of censored right now, but I believe that it's August 30th at Buchanan High School. I believe that a strong message wants to be sent to the school administration, as well as the school board, that black people is not going to put up with this in 2019 in Fresno, California. And we're going to be in black shirts. We're going to let them know that we're in solidarity with our children there. August 26th from 5 to 7, I believe. There's an open house, school night for African American students. We're going to be there as well.
This is at Bullard.
Bullard High School. And we're going to be in black shirts, and we're going to be addressing issues there with the principal and etc. I was told last night that the principal at Bullard is trying to reach me. So I'm still waiting on his call. Not quite sure what he wants to talk about, but I'm open to.
Talking is always good.
It's a good thing, and but I think that for what our African American children have endured, and the parents, the threats, the intimidation, the phone calls, the breaking into the homes, we're pulling our children out of the school. I think it's unjust, and I think for our Bullard community, again, which is predominantly white, has to understand how we feel. I mean, let's be real about it. Black folks was lynched here in America, and it was a town rally. It was a party. Yeah. Name calling. Some people might say, oh, well, George, I'm sorry we hung him, but we had to. But, so it's an educational piece for our community to understand that we cannot get lackadaisical and understand that we have to push policy from the board level, that we want real strong curriculum across from elementary to high school, so that the children can understand each other's culture and what is going on. So that's our responsibility as their fathers and mothers and elders in this community. And so I think that I received some calls today from some people from the Bullard community wanting to talk. And it was good to talk. Mm-hmm. Not sure what they want to talk about. He said he went and talked to his priest about speaking to me, and his priest said, I think you should go speak to Reverend Harris. Yes. And I'm open to speak. I'm open. Once you get, you might see me marching and, the bullhorn. That guy, man, he's mean. But once you sit down and speak, I'm a little teddy bear. Teddy bear, big muscle. Teddy bear with teeth.
I'm not afraid. From what's going on.
Well, that came up at the meeting last night. Historically, if you know Fresno or Fresno County, it came up about the Klan being in the Clovis area. How will we handle that if that came an issue? I believe that we're going to have some legal observers there with us to monitor and watch in case anything pop off. We want to be proactive. We don't want to be reactive. But we have a right to go to the game. Sure. We have a right to support our babies there. And so we have the right to do a direct action non-violently. Yes. We know that King did that a lot, but it turned violent. He didn't start the violence, but it came because of his presence. So we're not expecting any violence or anything like that, but we never know what's going to happen. We know that we'll be dealing with the Clovis PD, not Fresno PD, even though we know they're good friends. That's it.
Clovis has Fresno PD has a variety of issues, but it's a large city police force. It has a lot of issues.
Right.
And I know some Fresno PD cops who are wonderful, wonderful people, and some that are what they are.
Right.
Clovis is another story.
Right.
And I don't really mean to be super disrespectful, but there have been so many instances of being pulled over for driving while black, and I would tell a story, but I've probably told it too many times in the air already, and I would probably get a complaint because I have a great illustration of Clovis.
Right.
But I'll tell you too. After we get off the air.
Right.
Oh, now Nick's on the fold back going, no, tell that one. That's a good one. So I was teaching at Clovis Community College.
Right.
I was teaching this first half of U.S. history, and that's the only class it was just filling in one time. Normally I teach at City and at State, but I was teaching one semester at Clovis, and a very different student body than I'm used to.
Right.
The three schools I teach, the most at Fresno State, Fresno City, and UC Merced, they're so diverse that I notice the white students. This is just put it that way. They stand out because there are less of them. That wasn't the case at Clovis. At Clovis, the brown students, there the rooms are wide instead of long. So there's where the professor stands is at the front, but the room is horizontal across you instead of deep in front of you. And they're long tables. Well, down the edges of the tables, as they went down the back, were all the brown students. In the back were all the black students and Samoan and Pacific Islander students. For some reason, they were all back there.
Right.
And then all the white students were clustered up in the front, and especially in the first two rows. And we were talking about the black codes that had been established immediately after the end of Reconstruction and all of that. And I always try to bring the past to the present. And so I was comparing it to, I don't remember what I was comparing it to, but there was something I was talking about, and how so much of what really qualifies as overt prejudice and bigotry and racism is almost done without thinking. It's almost automatic. And this young lady, probably 18, probably right out of high school, pretty young little blonde thing, raises her hand and she's waving it and waving it. And I gotta admit, I admire this woman for telling the story, because it's rather an embarrassing story. And I know that I'm telling the story the right way, that I'm not misremembering it, because I told the story. I was teaching a class on it's called ethnic culture and relations. I call it race and ethnicity because I'm more race than ethnicity as far as my training, so I do it on race. But I told the story there, and I had a student in that class at Fresno State that had been in this class at Clovis. So I asked her after I told the story, did I tell the story right? She goes, this is exactly what she said. So what this young lady said was that her sister had come home. Now you can tell this is a game of telephone, right? A lot of different people are telling someone to tell somebody to tell somebody. So I will do the best that I can to keep the story as straight as possible. Her sister came home laughing one day, and she said, I got pulled over by the cops. This is in Clovis. And she said, well, what for? Well, her driver's side and passenger windows were tinted very, very dark, just like the back ones, and that's not legal under California law. You're supposed to be able to see the driver. So she's in Clovis. She's blue light. She pulls over. She pushes the little button, because she doesn't actually have to crank the window down. She pushes the button, right? And the window's going down, and the cop comes up, and this is what according to this student, her sister said the cop said to her, quote, I'm sorry, ma'am. The reason I pulled you over was your windows were tinted so dark I couldn't tell if you were black or not. Sorry to have bothered you. Have a nice day. Turned around, walked back to his car. She thought it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. She went home and told her family, oh, he pulled you over because he thought you were black. And they thought it was funny.
Wow.
And it wasn't until we started talking about this long history of racial suppression and murder and all of this stuff that it dawned on her that maybe that wasn't the right way to approach that. I mean, she should have told that cop, I'm not, but if I was, what would the difference be? Or if you pulled me over for breaking the law when you thought I was black, why are you not giving me a ticket now? Right? I mean, she doesn't want the ticket, obviously. and she was a young girl, and but she's young and blonde and white and in Clovis and doesn't have the experience, so she doesn't understand it, and I don't mean to make any excuses for it, but I think it's indicative of like I said, the words matter, right? It wasn't, and again, her sister told it to her, she told it to us, I'm telling it to you, so this is a long chain here, and I would love to know that it was false. Based on my own experience, especially in Clovis, I would believe every single word.
I mean, we don't expect any trouble, but it is what it is. And
so the game is so there's an open house, and the open house is at Bullard High, right?
The open house is on the 26th at Bullard.
Right, so 26th, between 5 and 7, at Bullard High, there'll be signs telling what room to go to and all that. And then on August 30th, so there'll be some preparation for the game, for the action on the 30th. Then on the 30th, at Buchanan High. Because they must have a football field there. Because that's how only half the high schools have which works. But I'm over by Fresno High. We don't have them. But so then at Buchanan High on August 30th will be the direct action. Wear black shirts, show up. They'll probably be sitting together in a section. And doing that.
This issue has hit national news. It was on Good Morning America. The LA Times was here last week for 3 or 4 days interviewing
all of the articles I quoted earlier were from.
It's like it's just here we go again, And so I think right now for African American people, and we have allies that's Caucasian, etc., and we appreciate them. But I think that where we at right now. For black children in this district. I mean, listen, Fresno Unified is the third largest school district in California, and we do not have not one black male principal. Why is that? I mean, it's just like, why are we still painting our face black? I mean, it just makes no sense. And so, I think the people that I met with, the parents, the mothers, and et cetera, last night at my church, I believe they're very sincere. I believe they're committed, they're dedicated. They want not just to do direct actions, but they want to change policy. They want to be part of the process. You see what I'm saying? Right. Not part of the problem. And also educate our children, because it's important for them to make sure that the history do not repeat itself. Right. That's where we are today. And so we're going to be pushing and hope that those can come out, wear some black shirts.
Any possibility of getting the sides together and discussing it? Maybe in a public forum where maybe these issues can be addressed?
I'm hoping that there's 2 calls I received today. I'm going to call them back this evening and see what they have to say. But I'm more into dialogue. I'd rather dialogue instead of do direct actions, right? But we understand that Dr. King said 3 things. He said, when there's a problem, ID the problem, negotiate the problem. If that don't work, go to direct action. So we're at the direct action piece, but that's not saying we cannot go back and let's have a conversation.
You have to do the 2. You have to do it all.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's all important.
It has to all be done together.
For social change,
Do let me know if something is set up where there's going to be the 2 sides coming together and talking, because I would love to maybe possibly get representatives from both sides on the show, or at least be able to talk about what happened. So I would love to cover that. We could sit and talk about these issues for the next 6 hours, and I would be in heaven, and I think you probably. But people want to hear the news in the next 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to wrap things up.
All right.
Do you see this as a problem? We just touched briefly early on about busing. Now, Fresno's solution to busing was to set up all the magnet schools. So Nick, for example, went down to Computech, which is adjacent to Edison over in West Fresno, for his junior high. I know students come to Fresno High for the baccalaureate program. People go to Bullard for the talent, and then Nick was at UHS for the music for that. So the high schools have, and that's the attempt. And Manchester Gate is another one. It's an attempt to get inclusive neighborhoods, or inclusive schools. unlike the old busing by quota, basically, we got 7%, so this town is black, so every school has to have 7% of the students be black. But if a family moves out, that screws us up. So that
Right.
it was such a nightmare when they were trying to implement it. This is actually an
Right.
easier to implement
Right.
solution. But like I said, statistically, our schools are more nationally, our schools are more segregated than they
Right.
were in '54. So, are these ongoing problems still just due to the fact that we live side by side in two completely different worlds?
Exactly.
I mean, is it just as simple as that? Is that
Yeah.
I never come to your world and you never come to mine, and therefore we live separate and we look at each other?
One of the things I've tried to do, even with the Unitarian Church, was to, let's exchange services. Have your congregation come over to my church, right? Have mine go over to your, so that we can start trying to break this. Oh, I've got to pull my purse because I see you coming,
I gotta
and
tell you, the music's better at the black church anyway. You ever been to a Lutheran service or a Methodist service and listen to the crap that they sing? That nothing against my Lutheran and Methodist friends, but Anglican, they just don't want to offend anybody or commit. But
Right.
the material that all the research that I've done and the books that I read, so they're all about black communities in the valley here. And so a lot of times when I'm out doing field work, the best place to find a bunch of people is to go to the church. And I'm not a believer, but I love to go to the black church
Right.
because it's just so much.
Right.
It's uplifting and it's exciting and it's happy, and you go, you know what? Life sucks, but we sure had a good time, And I've had a good time. I hope you've enjoyed
right.
yourself.
Thank
and
you
I
so
hope the
much.
audience has enjoyed putting up with us,
Yes, yeah.
pontificating for the last hour. And the news is next. Next week we will have Andrew Jans will be here. He's running for mayor, and then the following week we will be talking about the mural project down on the border between Mexico and the United States. The originator of that project is from Fresno, and we'll have her on, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.